Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Ground Transportation Insights. Today I'm joined by someone many of you may already know in the transit and transportation space, Mike Bismeyer, often known as the Kindness Guy. Mike currently serves as Senior Business Development and Portfolio Manager within Innovations in Transportation and brings more than 17 years of leadership experience across public transit, technology, and mobility. He also serves on the Canadian Urban Transit Association's Board of Directors and Executive Committee, has been recognized nationally for his leadership and service, including most recently the Edward J. Dowling Award for Distinguished Service. But today's conversation isn't about job titles or technology. It's about people, leadership, and workplace culture. Mike's message is rooted in a personal story that shaped his lifelong belief in kindness, empathy, mentorship, and human connection as the foundation of strong organizations. In this conversation, we talk about how leadership has shifted from leading down to empowering up, why mentorship, knowledge sharing, and real succession planning matter, how cross-department understanding strengthens teams, the importance of recognition, communication, and personal brand, and how everyday actions, both inside and outside the workplace, shape culture. Whether you're leading a transit agency, a transportation company, or any kind of service-based organization, this is a conversation about how culture is built one decision at a time. So let's get into it. Thanks, Mike, for joining me today. It's great to have you. Mike's known as the Kindness Guy, and we're going to have a great conversation today about workplace culture.
Yeah, no, pleasure to be here, Brian. I know we've known each other for a long time, and we've both been involved in a lot of different cultures and great experiences in transit. So yeah, happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So your personal story has shaped so much of your work. Can you share how your early experiences and that one act of kindness shifted your perspective and eventually influenced your leadership approach?
Yeah, sure. Happy. When I do my keynote speaking, I talk a bit about going through a tough year as a child, being bullied one particular school year. It was getting quite bad for me. And then for me, it was a random act of kindness that just changed my perspective, made me realize someone understood what was going on. I won't tell the whole story, but a particular bully that sort of threw my lunch away in front of others, stepped on it, would obviously do a lot of name calling, those sorts of things. And then that went on multiple times. And one day when I actually got onto the bus, I had another a kid who I didn't know said, "Hey, you can sit with me." And I was very untrusting at the time, of course, with everything I was going through.
Sure.
And when I sat down, the bus eventually pulled away from the stop, and this kid leaned over to me and he said, "Hey, I got your back." And of course, I didn't know what he meant. And he opened his knapsack and he had brought an extra lunch, right? So he had seen what I was going through each day. So it did two things, right? It opened my eyes that even at the age I was, that someone saw what was going on wasn't right. And through a random act of kindness sort of led me to believe that I was okay maybe to finally tell my parents, have my little breakdown, to talk to them. And, growing up in that era, I won't date myself too much, but, my dad's solution when I first told him was, well, we'll put you in some boxing lessons and, you can give them the gears or you can learn to run, and you might lose a little bit of weight, or he might never catch you. And so to this day, I run 5 kilometers a day. So the route I took, but so that was a random act of kindness. And then through my father as well, I always call my dad the accidental alcoholic mentor. He's 45 years sober, but has led a life of kindness and gratitude, giving back in the community. He went on to become a drug and alcohol counselor. So, I just grew up in a home where it was all about second chances, understanding the story behind the people, and being a little more kind and empathetic to people.
Wow. Well, that's I think many of us can relate to that story of being bullied as kids. I can certainly remember some school bus stop situations or some on the bus situations. It's also very ironic that occurred on the bus, and now you're in the bus business, so to speak. It's ironic. I'm sure that irony isn't lost on you either.
No, you're right. And I when I do talk to people, I have a picture that I use sometimes, and my mom happened to capture a lot of things that were going to happen later in life. There was some transportation wallpaper in a bedroom and a vehicle bedspread, and a tape deck, because I also had a little bit of a DJing. I love to talk, as because you and I talk all the time. So I think my parents sort of maybe were a little bit of fortune tellers. But yeah, and that also led to the first company in this industry I was with, where you and I first met. that company, we had an outlet to schools by selling the technology on school buses, and that led us. We started the United to End Bullying campaign there, which was a big part of it, and I became the spokesperson for that. I was super excited about it. But yeah, so it's there is a lot of irony, enough irony that Alanis Morissette would be proud here in Canada for that, for sure.
Well, Mike, thank you for that. For those of you who don't know, Mike gives a keynote. The industry that he works in is really more on the public side of transportation. But there's obviously a lot of relevance between the public side and the private side. But Mike has given his kindness keynote many times now. So my question for you, Mike, is why do you think that keynote and that message resonates so strongly across such different audiences, from transit agencies to corporate teams, community groups, and even schools?
Yeah, great question. I think it's because the message is universal, right? You alluded to it yourself, that we've all sort of maybe seen, bullying or had something that's impacted ourselves. I mean, I think stripping back leadership to the basics, right? Human connection and learning more about the people we're with. I think by me sharing my own story, no matter what crowd I'm talking to, I've had people come up to me when I'm done and just saying, wow, you made me realize I've never talked about this, or I've never done this. And I recently just gave a keynote in Virginia, 160 plus people. And I had someone in the audience that actually came to me and said, wow, like just the way you talk about your dad and his life of recovery, my own company doesn't even know I'm 7 years sober, but I just wanted to let you know it means a lot that you're out there talking about your father. I hope that my kids talk about it someday. So I think when we tell a personal story, it drags people into understanding there's more to this picture, right? The people are, we should learn more about the people we're side by side every day. So I think that's why it resonates for sure. And it's the simple things, really.
Absolutely. Well, while you work for a technology company and your focus is transit, you've been in leadership roles for quite a while, and you've done some leadership training outside of the transportation industry, and you certainly do these leadership talks now. So let's talk a little bit about leadership versus, we're going to set the kindness and the culture thing aside for just a moment, because we've got a lot to talk about in terms of culture. But one of the things you often say is that leadership today is about empowering up rather than managing down. So talk to us about that and what it looks like in practice.
Yeah, I mean, it's really shifting from control to celebration, right? I mean, we've all seen the micromanager or the over controlling sort of culture, right? I think from a leadership perspective, the best way to be successful is to consistently be empowering or letting your people know. Active listening. I mean, it's a skill. I mean, I've been married 30 plus years, and my wife would tell you it's a skill that I'm still working on every day. But active listening is one from a leadership perspective that we all need to know.
Mine too.
Yeah, exactly, right. And hey, I'm so thankful she loves the challenge, because I'd have left me many years ago, right? But I mean, leaders, when they empower up, they build confidence, they build ownership within. I think one of the things I will say is celebrating success. We've moved away from that culturally as things have gotten busier and there's all this technology. And the example I'll use is early in my career, one of the companies I worked for, you'd sell a $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 deal. We'd all be high fiving and let's go for a beer on Friday. And then it moved to later on as we scaled up and we were successful, and someone would sell $1 million deal, and the only email you would get is, hey, can you divide that up into 3 orders so operations can handle it better, right? And it's like, I think we've moved from sort of that thank to spank, where we're only sort of communicating when we're saying we want something done different or better, as opposed to saying thanks first, right? And I think that's empower your team by recognizing what they've done before asking for more, right? I mean, it's definitely important for sure.
Yeah, and you have to be very intentional. I think the companies that get that right, the companies that have strong cultures, are intentional about that. They, it is a part of the culture, which is to celebrate those small wins. And obviously, $1 million contract is not a small win. It may be for some companies, but I don't know.
Right.
For my company, it would be a huge deal.
Yeah.
All right. Well, continuing down the leadership path, you talk about kindness and empathy a lot, and those are oftentimes dismissed as soft skills, yet you frame them as strategic. So how should companies integrate them in a way that truly impacts culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing, the world has changed, right? And how we recruit and we go after employees and how we build companies has definitely changed. And I think we start by embedding it in our own DNA, right? One of the things we can look at is what is what is the company's mission statement? Has that ever changed? Have we updated that? Does it reflect kindness and empathy and some of the things we hope our employees sort of emulate as well, right? And I think some of the things we can do is look at different types of KPIs, right? And have some engagement, involvement in what our employees are doing elsewhere too, right? Understand like some metrics to what they're doing in the community. And maybe, I've been with companies like the company I'm with now, we have community service days that people can book off and go and use. And those are great things that all help the company culture, right? And I think, having whether it's an internal newsletter that talks about employees, nothing to do with the service or product you're doing, those move the shift from soft to more strategic. But I think you have to, again, as you said, we have to be purposeful, and it has to be part of our mission statement, the DNA, and it has to relate to what we're delivering to make people believe, right? And we all want to be part of something, and so re-sculpting that story sometimes is how we can make it strategic for sure.
Yeah, those are great points. We've had a couple of conversations leading up to this conversation, and in particular, when you talk about kindness and empathy, one of the things we've discussed before is that while that may be dismissed as a soft skill for some folks who may be perhaps in, I'm not sure what generation you're in, but my generation, I'm a Gen Xer, and then my parents' generation, the Boomer generation, it was likely soft skills, is how it was viewed. But as the dynamics of the workforce continue to change and evolve, and we go from multi-generational that has, still a decent percentage of boomers and Xers to more millennials and Gen Zers and the generations that come beyond that, this stuff is going to be much more important. As you and I talked about earlier today, it isn't just about pay and benefits. It's also about the feel of the job and leadership and feeling a part of something and having a purpose beyond just getting the work done. So companies that are able to figure that out now and make that transition, and it is a difficult transition to make, especially if you've been built in an era or if you've come together in an era where the leadership style was more autocratic. It's kind of going from autocratic to diplomatic, and you've got to make that shift. And the sooner you make that, the more successful you will be as the workforce continues to evolve.
I agree. And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think it's as simple as sometimes companies, I think we're in this constant recruitment scenario anyway. I use the scenario quite often is because I'm involved in sort of recruiting and mentoring new employees in a lot of the companies I've been with. And one of the things I'll say I saw a change over the years is I don't mean this in any way the wrong way. I call it the Fruit Loop generation. You can literally hire someone on Monday, being an amazing individual, but on Thursday, they'll leave because company X is offering free Fruit Loops in the coffee room on Fridays, right? So you never know what you're up against sometimes. And you can't always get it right, but you got to change the culture and some of the little soft things as well, as we say, and they become strategic, but little things that entice people to stay. You and I have talked about this before on previous conversations is, evaluating even some of those job descriptions that go out and changing those. When's the last time you looked at that, right? Have your leadership team write out what they think a job replacement or posting would like for the role. And it's funny how those don't always align with what HR might actually be putting out there. So I think that's another easy thing to start to change the culture is to look more strategically at what are we even asking of people. And then we wonder why it doesn't fit when we hire someone, right? So I think that's part of it as well.
Yeah, I'll oftentimes, I will take a job description and read that description of a particular role in my organization and say, wow, that's not anything like anything like the job that we're actually hiring for. And oftentimes, obviously we're talking about culture here today, but recruitment. Sometimes you've got a great culture and you're just expanding, and so you need to recruit for that. But sometimes your culture needs some work, and so turnover, it triggers recruiting activities. And sometimes, when you successfully recruit, it's all about setting the right expectations from the very beginning. And sometimes if that job description is incorrect, then you're setting the wrong expectations from the very beginning. So getting that right is very key. And obviously that's just one example of some things you can do. So as we continue to talk about culture, what's one small act of recognition, gratitude, or appreciation you've seen make a big difference in the workplace?
Yeah, again, it's simple, right? I think a simple thank you can be transformative, right? Getting back to where we're acknowledging people's efforts, we're acknowledging some of the things we're doing. I think it inspires people to continue to contribute. I think we're human nature is we all want to be recognized or understand that we're part of the end solution, and that our input is being valued, right? And for me, I've had some great mentors that have always said that, hey, we always value what you want to say. Come with, whether it's a solution in a scenario or come forward. But I think as a leader, like just thanking our team once in a while, reaching out, like one of the things I try and do myself every Friday is I try to reach back into my organization on Friday and say thanks to someone that week that's maybe just answered a question for me. It's as simple as that, because they're getting inundated, and you just want people to understand that you are grateful that they're part of the team, right? I've been on a lot of companies where there are a lot of those little things that mean a lot. And that's why you stay with some great leaders, because they're doing those things and that they value your sort of input and or what you're doing. I mean, if someone's doing something great in the community, bring that up too on the next Teams call. Say, hey, Brian, I saw your post about working with Boy Scouts of America. That's super cool. Would love to learn more. Like those little things, but again, learn to understand that the story behind that employee, right? Those are the simple things we can do for sure.
Yeah. The things you just talked about, I mean, obviously we both work in transportation. You're on the public side, I'm more on the private side, but I know we can both say that we've seen, some great examples of this and some challenging examples of this. I mean, let's face it, transportation is a tough, unforgiving business.
It is.
And oftentimes, you've got a list of 10 things that need to be done and time to do maybe 2 or 3 of those. And so again, as we mentioned earlier, you have to plan to do this. You have to be very intentional with doing it. But it is one of the keys to those strong workplace cultures that we talked about, that will help transition you if you're having some culture challenges today.
For sure.
So now, obviously a big part of culture is leadership. So let's talk a little bit more about leadership. One of the things you warn about is information hoarding. And instead you emphasize mentorship and knowledge sharing. Why do you think that's so critical for culture and for succession planning?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple things there. I mean, obviously hoarding information can be a culture killer, right? We've all been part of an organization, or we've worked for someone before that's a bit of a gatekeeper of information. And there's multiple reasons for that. There are times when there is just simply the information that others should not be privy to. That's one scenario. But, we should always be empowering people to learn up and learn beyond, because for me, I always say that if I'm going to have a day off or I'm going to be sick, I want someone on my team to be able to step up and do the role so they don't have to reach out to me, right? So those are the way we need to start thinking about it, right? Mentorship in action is leadership in action, right? Like always learning, always sharing, having people on your team that others want to emulate. That's what fosters growth, right? And being part of that sort of that valued team. I think modeling, it's hard to lead with kindness and empathy if people don't trust you. So trust is another thing. Like I think you need to be honest with employees, right? So I think it's all about communication. It's the simple things. It's being more intentional. It's being more often. One of the things you and I have talked about prior as well is, employee evaluations. I've always thrived on just having input on employee evaluations, because I feel that any company that's doing them once a year has already got it wrong, right? Like if you're waiting once a year to tell Brian you're not satisfied with something he's done, we've missed the boat, right? We've had opportunities for improvement 11 other months, right? And to sit down regularly and say, hey, here's some things we should do. I love what you did here, but is there any chance you could do it this way next time, or think of incorporating this, right? Like, so I think that constant communication, but being honest with people. I don't want someone to wait 9 months to tell me they didn't like something I said in January. Like I think we are grown-ups in the grand scheme of things too. And we want, again, to be a valued part of the team. And we don't want to give people extra reasons to get their back up, right? So.
Yeah, no doubt. I used to tell my team at Disney, I used to say, and I make this commitment to you, and I expect you to make this commitment to your teams as well, is that the annual evaluation should be a summary of all of our conversations throughout the year. There should be nothing new. Perhaps, sometimes where it's easier to talk the negative and not as easy to talk the positive. I mean, that's kind of the theme of what we're talking about today. So we need to get better at that. But sometimes when especially if you've got a really strong employee, when you're writing that evaluation, you may just really say some really nice things about them that perhaps you haven't said to them in person. And
absolutely,
maybe that's something that's new on there. But certainly the negative stuff, the critical stuff, the coaching stuff There should not be anything new on an employee evaluation at the end of the year. It should all
Yeah.
be, if you don't meet with your direct reports on a weekly basis, it certainly should be on a regular basis. Some people have large teams and weekly is not practical, but I'd say at least a couple times a month. And as you're doing as you're having those discussions, you're coaching, and then not everything goes on the employee evaluation, just the big stuff. And it should be a summary of your conversation, so there are no surprises. Because I'm sure you agree, Mike. Neither of us would ever want to walk into our evaluation and find out something for the first time that we could have done something about 11 months ago if you just told us about it.
Well, and the other thing too, I think, as you said, how can we change quickly, or how can we start to change the culture, right? I think expanding knowledge of our base of people that work under us or report up to us, however you want to say that, or part of the team. There's no, to me, it should be one team. But I think, one of the things early on in my career, I had one particular manager that on my evaluation said, hey, I need you to be stronger on this, this, and this. And these were skills that were not part of my original job thing, but they were also stuff that I'd never been trained on. So I said, hey, that's great. Do you mind if I sign up for this course at the college? It's going to be about $180. And he's like, yeah, I'd love it. And then I said, then I can master these Excels and these reports that you want, but I've never even had training on this, right? Like, you sending me a sheet and telling me to update it doesn't do me any good. And he's like, I love it. And it was also a turning point for him to realize, you know what? And then about 2 years later, we incorporated, an educational allowance for people that wanted to take courses based around their job role, right? Because to me, you can't force a person to do something we've never offered training on either, right? It's not going to work. So that's part of the culture as well, like to encourage that consistent growth, right? And you and I are also heavily involved in, both on the public and the private side of, the multiple trade shows and the multiple things. I always say the best education I've had is APTA and CUTA, right? Those are the organizations where I go to all these conferences every year and listen to these sessions, and it's all our peers sharing hits, misses, lessons learned, and that's how we get better. And so, you know what? Maybe start sending someone different to those conferences and start to enrich different people on your team, right? Don't send the same three guys, maintenance, operations, and let's try and get a marketing and HR and some of these other people, because that's how we foster growth, right? So.
Well, and for those of you who, APTA, obviously American Public Transit Association, CUTA, Canadian Urban Transit Association.
Yes, sorry.
But yes, you're absolutely right. If you're going to send, maybe you send the same departments, but like you said, send different people, because those are, especially for smaller companies, for a large company, or for some of the public transit agencies, they may have developmental programs, but for smaller companies, those association meetings, and certainly on the private side, you've got the American Bus Association, the United Motor Coach Association, lots of state and regional associations as well. Those can be, they're treasure troves of knowledge. And
they are.
For folks, especially the 80. I don't know what it is obviously on the public side, but on the private side, I've heard a number that it's somewhere around 85% of the operators are truly small businesses with 10 or 12 units or less. So those association meetings can be, that might be the only opportunity they have
that's right,
for the year to get that information.
Yeah, no, it's important for sure. Like you say, the more people that you can get on board as part of the journey that's the important part. And then again, that changes the culture, right? When we foster that learning. I mean, I've been in those conversations before on certain technology that I've sold over the years where, you have certain people that say, well, we were never trained on this. And then you find out that there's 4 different departments of the organization. They were all trained at different times, nothing in sync as to how they might use this together, right? And so again, that's that whole internal learning and fostering the communication piece, right? So
yeah. All right, let's continue to talk about one of the components of managing an organization's culture is how the different departments work together with each other. And this is an issue that is going to be I would think it's probably going to be very similar on both the public and the private side, and that's cross department understanding and relationships. So, operations and maintenance, operations and safety, human resources and operations. Operations is kind of a common theme there because that's what makes everything happen. But, in your keynotes, cross-department understanding is a big theme. So how can organizations build empathy between teams who don't typically interact or may not interact as often, or in the world, in the virtual world we many of us operate in today, they even if they are interacting regularly, they may have not ever met each other as in person.
Yeah, I think it starts with storytelling, right? We start to talk a bit about, and we'll talk about this a bit later, but when we learn more about the people that are part of our team and, cross-functionally understanding, have maybe some internal lunch and learns where you have a different person from a different department speak like every second Thursday about what are they doing day to day so that others understand the story behind the ask, right? Because a lot of times our interaction cross departmentally is when I'm sending you a note, Brian, because I need help, right, from your operation or your support team, but I don't really know really all the other great things you guys are doing. And so I think people, again, it comes down to the human side, right? We're all colleagues and peers, but again, silos, we hear that word all the time. And we've sort of all been part of that, where there's different silos where, A is not talking to B, and then we wonder why the customer or the end result or the employee is not satisfied because a bunch of people haven't sort of got together and discussed the idea. So I think a great opportunity is to do like some sort of internal lunch and learn storytelling. I always say that even if I'm having Brian present about what do you do day to day for the company, you start with a 2-minute intro of what do you do outside of this, like what are the great things you're doing, or what drives you outside of this, right? So that's what I would say is the easy way to look at some of that cross departmental. We used to have a program when I was in the retail world where it was a management training program. They actually it was a 6-month progression program where they spent a month in every other department before they could get that final certificate to be a store manager. So they would spend a month in the meat department, a month in the bakery, and learn so that, again, as you and I have talked before, they knew what was behind the overall operation, right? And the ask that they were going to do a lot of times. So
That is a great, setting aside the culture stuff for a minute. That is a great model to emulate, is to have folks spend some time in the different departments, especially if they're going to be leading the organization. That is definitely something that we used to do at Disney. As I would put on the costume and go out there and actually go through the training. It helps you meet the
awesome.
employees and build those relationships, and establish credibility, but it also lets you understand what, the job they do every day and how difficult it is. I mean, one of the teams I managed at Disney was the parking team, and, parking in December is not too bad, but parking in July when it's 100 degrees and you're standing on the asphalt, it's pretty challenging. So, I trained it during that time. So I knew when they were coming into my employee roundtables and they were expressing concerns about hydration and heat and things like that, I had been out there. I knew exactly what they were dealing with. So those are great.
That's fantastic.
Great conversations. And, one other thing, there's this adage, you don't wait until you need a relationship to establish it. You need to start, and I may have not gotten that exactly right, but I think I got the point across. But I think that's key when it comes to cross departmental relationships in any organization, but certainly in transportation is your operations manager and your maintenance manager and your safety manager, they don't have to be best buds, but they need to get along and they need to understand each other's perspectives, and they need to have good, strong relationships, and their teams need to have strong relationships so that when the chips are down, that they pull together and they work together. So, and having that understanding, and having that appreciation for each other's roles should naturally build empathy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, you nailed it for sure.
All right. Well, continuing that theme, you've talked about in your keynotes, highlighting the heroes that we work with every day. So, talk to us a little bit about that. And what are some of the simple ways that leaders can surface some of those hidden stories?
Yeah, no, that's great. And really that is the probably the primary behind my keynote. I talk about, the day-to-day, we work with so many amazing individuals that are doing so many great things, and maybe not always truly understanding what our coworkers, our colleagues, or peers are putting up with, and some of the adversity some of our colleagues put up with just to show up at work some days, right? And so I think when you learn a little more what's behind the person, I think that builds that whole we're all part of one, right? And I think some of the things that companies can do is company posts, like if you are involved in the community or with a charity or those sorts of things, or you want to celebrate something that an employee has done, you should post about that, or you should send out sort of some market notification of that. Because I'll use this example, when I technologies that I've sold over the years, we'll do a post on LinkedIn, those sorts of things. Of course, you want to post about what you're doing there, but those will average, 600-700 hits, and that's great. But when I do something about the keynotes or the kindness or the community impact stuff, those are all well over 2,000. So that tells you people that stuff resonates with people, and we're all looking to make a difference, right? So I think, understanding the story behind the people also helps shape the culture that you're headed for, right? Because we've got great people, and don't you want to be part of this? Becomes part of that story and message.
It's almost like the algorithms are looking for that type of content versus just the traditional promotional content. They're looking for those stories. That's an interesting observation. You're absolutely right. It makes the marketing person's job challenging, but that is very true.
It does.
You have to look for those types of stories. Well, continuing, talking a little bit more about culture. One of the things you talk about in your keynote is you say people, passion, and purpose. It's not just a slogan, it's also a framework, and that's a signature part of your message. So can you walk us through that real quick and talk to us about why that matters?
Yeah, sure. Call it the 3 Ps, right? There's behind there's these 3 things that are a change in the culture that you want to be. And then there's the passion, right? What's fueling you to keep you moving? And it could be something outside of work. It could be something that's driving you personally. And then the purpose, right? I think part of that is we are making a difference in what we do day to day. And sometimes that's, am I in the right fit? I am in a job where I believe I'm making change. And you and I have had this discussion before. I love being in public transit because I believe transit inherently is kindness in action, right? It's giving people hope and opportunity that wouldn't necessarily have that choice without the services we provide, right? And so that drives me, and I like that. And I think when you unlock that engagement and the meaning behind people, when I meet with folks or I do a kindness keynote, I typically try and find some random tidbits about some employees, and I like to incorporate that into my pitch or my actual session. And so they'll see themselves, and I'll say, these are some of the great people you're already working with. And did you know Brian was an Iron Maiden fan, and on Saturday he likes to volunteer at this team, grow together, and you want to be part of that culture, right? Of people that are doing I call it the peripherals, the outside a normal day to day, right? So those are huge for sure.
A couple more questions for you, Mike. Back to the culture piece. Obviously you've been in the industry. You and I both have been in the transportation business for almost 20 years on different sides, and you've been in and out of organizations, probably many more organizations than I have. And so I'm sure you've seen healthy and unhealthy cultures during that time. Without naming names, what's one lesson that leaders should take away from organizations that got culture wrong?
Yeah, honesty is the first thing, right? I think we need to communicate, and we need to be more honest with our workforces all the time, right? If there is something that's not right or doesn't align with the overall mission, we need to let people know ahead of time. Again, jumping back to that evaluation piece, right? Like don't wait till it's too late. But I think taking it from the other side too, right? I think we have it upon ourselves. Again, we need to be proud of the brand and the story we bring to every employer as well, and be part of it. So I think it's okay to admit that you might not align, or it might not be the right fit. And sometimes that you have to be that change, right? I think the unhealthy organizations are really the ones where I saw there was a lack of people go quiet, and then people end up leaving, right? When they stop communicating, that's probably not a good sign either, right? And you get into this constant recruitment scenario, right? And the best form of recruitment is retainment, right? Is understanding the team you have, empowering them to be better, and empowering them to bring others that want to be part of the solution as well. So yeah, I've seen both sides. I will say this, I've really only had one particular company at one point where it was a little bit unhealthy, and there was just certain people you couldn't change their mindset. And so for me, that was when I started looking, and I was provided an opportunity to step up in the industry to a new exciting role. And again, nothing bad about the company I was with or the product they had, but there were certain people at the time where you just weren't going to change the way they looked at things. And so for me, I had to change me. That's the way I think sometimes we've got to look at that as well.
Yeah, that is very true. At the end of the day, obviously we vote with our feet, and if we continue to go somewhere each and every day, and it's not the right culture, then it's incumbent upon us to try to find a better situation. And obviously that's easier said than done.
It is.
If you're in an entry level job, it might be easier to just find another job. If you're running the company, it might be harder to, or if it's your own company, you're not, you can't just, I guess you could sell, but you can't just check it out. You're gonna have to roll your sleeves up and work. And if you're a senior executive in a transit organization, you may have to, look for other, another opportunity. It may take longer, I guess is the point. But
well, I think you and I
intentional.
Yeah. And I think you and I joked about this. Like when I was, before my 17 and a half years in public transit, I was 21 years industry. And I worked for one grocery chain. 21 years I was there, and I worked in multiple stores. He stayed how much he hated the job. And I always used to say, you're free to leave, you can go elsewhere. Right. But it is funny, right? I think it's easier to complain than change. Right. So, you have to take it upon yourself and sort of look inward sometimes. And that's a skill that makes us all better too. The other thing that you and I have chatted about before is the power of saying no sometimes, and understanding that, you know what, I might not be the best person for this role or responsibility. It's okay to admit that. I mean, we have to, don't put yourself in an uncomfortable scenario as well. And I think that's all part of culture, right? And having a great leader that says, yeah, you know what, I'd rather keep you over on this project. I'll get someone else for this. You'll learn that really quick when you start to say, I don't think I'm the right person either for that.
Yeah, no doubt. One more question for you. If you could leave leaders with one action that they could take tomorrow to improve their workplace culture, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a simple one, and I know we hear it all the time, but lead by example. And that means if we really want to change the culture, then you have to lead that change, and you have to start to have these traits that others will emulate, that will become part of just the mission statement, the brand of what you're delivering. From a kindness perspective, I would say put a random act of kindness placeholder on your own calendar once a week to do something nice or say something nice to someone else, whether that's filling out a comment card at a local business we frequent all the time and telling someone they did a great job, or again, reaching inward and just saying something to an employee. But it has to be genuine, not just intentional. It has to be genuine as well. But I think we need, like you mentioned, the algorithm, we need to start to change our own internal feed, right? We need to start to think of more of how do we bring kindness, empathy, gratefulness into some of the other things we're delivering every day. And I would say, right away, start to look at, from a company perspective, if you're thinking of even ingraining this into the company, does everything else that you've sort of externally done even align with what you think you want to do? Because if they don't align, it's not going to work. Right. And I think, from a leadership perspective, lead by example. And I'll leave this, real quick. We've talked about, random acts of kindness and sort of things. And, real quick example, my wife at local Home Depot had a bunch of molding she needed cut. I was out of town. She went down, she was there an hour. This guy cut like 200 feet of molding all so she could get it into the truck. And, I was out of town, but I filled out a comment card for the store. And I said, hey, this Tyler spent an hour with my wife, did a phenomenal job. I just want to let you know, the same day I got a call from that store manager, and he said, your timing was impeccable. You don't know how bad we needed this. I'm going to pull my staff up tomorrow to let them know they really are doing a good job, because all we get is negative comment cards. No one takes the time to say anything positive. So I think, just we all want to be acknowledged and valued. And I think sometimes our expectation, when we get that expectation from others, we should definitely acknowledge it so that it continues to reciprocate and people continue. I'm grateful. I mean, I went through a spout this summer. My dad was hospitalized for 10 weeks. I was in and out of the hospital every day for 10 weeks. And what I will say is that I'm not man enough to be a healthcare worker to see what they were putting up with every day, but thank goodness we have them. And I was sure to send a comment card when he left that hospital to say, just, we truly appreciate what each and every one of you do every day. Right. I mean, I think we need to take time to say it. That's all.
No, those are great points. Great points, Mike. And, we had this conversation a little while ago as well. And you told me that story about your wife's experience at Home Depot. And, we all want that type of experience as customers, and we all want that type of experience. We want our customers to have that type of experience, as leaders of organizations. So, I think you've got to, there's this saying out there, you have to inspect what you expect. And so as leaders,
I love that.
If you want if you want to make sure that you have that sort of culture for not just for your employees, but also for your guests or your customers, you got to be present in the operation and whatever that operation may be. So,
Yeah.
and inspect and coach coach in the moment to make sure that folks are delivering that great service that you just talked about. But you also, as the customer, I also believe that you have to encourage what you expect. And like you said,
Bingo.
took the time to fill out that comment card. And obviously, based on your example, the positive comment card rose to the top
It
because they don't
did.
get
It
as many
did.
of
Yeah.
them. So that's
Yeah.
great. And whether it's something like that or whether it's acknowledging great service, obviously tipping is somewhat pervasive. It's, people
Yeah.
want tips all over the place, but in the traditional environments where tipping is a thing, certainly when you go out to a restaurant, if you have great service at a restaurant, tip them, because that is how they make their money. And it is also how I always look at it is that's how you encourage people to continue to give that great service is to tip accordingly. So great stuff. Well, Mike, any other pearls of wisdom? Lots of wisdom in this conversation, but any other pearls of wisdom you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, well, what I will say is like I always believe in saying thanks, right? I mean, you and I have known each other most of my 17 years, and we've interacted times over that. But what I really appreciate is that we get to circle back around and have a conversation every once in a while. I truly appreciate everything you're doing to make culture and to make companies better and leadership teams. And I mean, we're always in an education cycle, right? So we should always be learning. And then, I'll leave with this tidbit. One of the things my dad, if you wake up every day and are a little more grateful, things will probably work out. If you're resentful, shit happens, right? So I think you need to approach every day, and I think sometimes the other thing is you have no idea the impact you can have on someone by just saying thanks or acknowledging them because someone else hasn't or they're having a bad day, right? So I think we can all be a little more kind. We can all take a little more time, but yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Always happy to share. And you've been a great peer for me over the years and have helped me learn too. And yeah, it's always great to circle back up for sure.
Well, again, Mike, I appreciate your time today. Great conversation. As I mentioned a couple times throughout this, Mike gives this keynote address mostly in the transportation related industries, but he also can give this because, again, the message resonates beyond transportation. So if folks are interested in learning more about your keynote and potentially having you come speak at to their teams, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, that's great. And thanks, Brian. And yeah, I mean, obviously I do it a lot in the transit space, but I do schools. I've done a lot of Rotary clubs, Lions clubs, those sorts of things. And recently I just did my first architecture firm that had me in Ohio. So yeah, it definitely resonates with different people and it's all about the simple things. But if they want to get a hold of me through, ping me on LinkedIn, just look me up on there, Mike Bismeyer. And then I do have a kindness handle there, but by all means, feel free to reach out and message me there, and I'm happy to get in touch and send a bio and all that fun stuff. But yeah, no, I really appreciate it, and hopefully, Brian and you and I will be doing something together next year at one of the conferences, and we can cross paths there. But feel free to reach out anytime. Yeah, thanks a lot for that.
Absolutely, and if you need help with connecting with Mike, feel free to reach out to me as well. And I can connect you with Mike. Well, Mike, again, thanks for your time. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Kindness is cool, and so is your podcast. Thanks for everything.
Thank you. That wraps up my conversation with Mike Bismeyer, a leader whose message goes far beyond kindness alone. What stood out to me most is that strong workplace cultures aren't built through slogans or organizational charts. They're built through leadership behavior, communication, mentorship, trust, recognition, and the daily choices we make as leaders. Mike's experiences across public transit, advocacy, and industry leadership offer a powerful reminder that culture doesn't happen by accident, it happens by intention. If you'd like to learn more about Mike's keynote, invite him to speak to your team, or continue the conversation around leadership and workplace culture, you can connect with him on LinkedIn. And as always, if you'd like an introduction, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you again for listening to this, my first Ground Transportation's Insights audio-only post. Until next time, lead well, take care of your people, and remember, culture follows leadership.